Hey guys! Tonight we drift back to the flickering torchlight of ancient Mesopotamia, specifically to the dusty, deliciously chaotic streets of around 3200 BCE. The air smells like roasted barley, river mud, and the faint waft of goat. You're standing in the marketplace just as the sun dips behind the ziggurat. Traders are shouting, donkeys are braying, and someone's trying to sell you a questionable fig pastry. You probably won't survive this economy without a good memory and even better haggling skills. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and the local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're all tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge slowly past stalls of dates and jars of sesame oil, careful not to bump the fishmonger's questionable crate. In this world, coins don't exist. Instead, everything is bartered. 2 goats for a bolt of wool, 3 jugs of beer for a half-day's labor, that kind of thing. There's a man trying to trade a chicken for a handful of lapis lazuli. It's not going well. This barter economy is, let's call it vibrant, and deeply chaotic. Transactions happen on memory and trust alone, which means everyone here has a very good memory, or a very strong club, in case of disputes. You overhear an argument between a lentil farmer and a brewer. The lentils were delivered last week, but no one remembers how many. Someone's mother-in-law is being blamed. A small crowd gathers. This sort of confusion was exactly the spark that eventually led to something astonishing. The invention of writing. Not for poetry, not for epic tales or religious texts. Those came later. Writing, humble and magnificent, began as the answer to a simple problem. Wait, didn't I already pay you for that goat? It starts small, of course. In the early days, people used clay tokens to track promises. A small cone meant a jar of oil. A disc might stand for a sheep. There are dozens of shapes, tucked into small clay envelopes, called bullae, and sealed up tight. Kind of like putting Monopoly pieces in a piggy bank and hoping no one shakes it too hard. You can imagine the scene. 2 people meet in the square. One's delivering grain. The other? Payment. But it's not exchanged all at once. So they create a bulla, press the tokens into soft clay, seal it, and everyone goes on their way. If there's a dispute later, smash the bulla open and count the tokens. It's like cracking open a cereal box to find the prize, only this time it's your entire barley shipment on the line. The more people traded, the more complicated it got. Historians still argue whether this complexity was driven more by local temple economies or the demands of international trade. But one thing's for sure, you can't just trust someone's cousin's apprentice to remember how many donkeys passed through the gate last Tuesday. So, slowly, merchants and scribes begin experimenting. They press those same token shapes onto the surface of the clay, making impressions to represent quantities without having to include the actual tokens. It's lazier, but in a genius way, and you can feel that shift happening around you, right here in Night falls. Oil lamps flicker in the doorways. Somewhere, a temple bell rings. You find yourself watching a scribe under a low awning, hunched over a tablet, stylus in hand. He's not composing a sonnet. He's writing down how many fish were delivered that morning. It's dull. It's bureaucratic. It's the seed of civilization itself. You're still in though the market has quieted a little. A stray goat noses a discarded melon rind near your feet. Somewhere, a baby cries. You drift toward a quieter section of the bazaar, where deals aren't shouted but whispered. More serious negotiations involving bulk grain, oil, and livestock. This is where things get complicated. And when things get complicated, people argue. A man with a shockingly well-oiled beard is trying to convince a vendor that he paid for 7 jars of date wine last week, not 6. The vendor disagrees. Loudly. The bearded man insists his cousin witnessed it. The vendor suggests the cousin might have been sampling the product too generously to count accurately. Barter systems seem charming from a distance, quaint even. But here in the thick of it, you realize how fragile they are. Everything depends on memory, reputation, and goodwill. Three things not known for their long shelf life in a hot Mesopotamian summer. So people start looking for ways to make their deals stick. Enter the clay token. We touched on them already, but now you're watching them in action. Imagine a small, flat pebble of clay. Some are shaped like cones, others like spheres or discs. Each represents a specific item, one for sheep, another for jars of oil, another still for a unit of labor. If you need to track an order of 10 goats, you'd bundle 10 tiny goat tokens together. Now you've got a physical memory aid, something to back up your side of the story when someone swears it was only 8 goats max. These tokens weren't random. They were standardized and widely understood across regions, which means people had to agree on what a goat token looked like. That's a meeting you would not want to attend. All those in favor of making the sheep tokens slightly less round? But as useful as these were, they were also a bit vulnerable. Drop them, lose them, mix them up. Your whole accounting system is toast. So clever folks came up with a workaround. They took a hollow ball of clay, a bully, and sealed the tokens inside. Then they rolled a cylinder seal over the outside, imprinting it with their name, their symbol, maybe even a smug little signature goat for flair. Now you have a closed record of a transaction. You can't fake it without breaking the bully. You can't argue with it, unless you want to stand in front of a priest and smash open your own receipt like an egg. And yet, disputes still happened. People claimed the wrong tokens were used. Someone's toddler got a hold of a bully and turned it into a chew toy. One fringe theory even suggests that some people started making counterfeit tokens, early clay-based fraud. Historians still argue whether the shift from memory to tokens was driven more by trade or taxation. Some say it was temple administrators trying to keep track of tithes and labor. Others insist it was roving merchants who just got tired of being swindled in alleyways over bags of lentils. But whether it was born in a temple granary or aboard a creaky reed boat, the clay token system transformed Mesopotamian trade. It made trust portable. It made memory tangible. It laid the groundwork for something much bigger and flatter. You're still standing near that argument about the 7 jars of date wine. It has now expanded to involve 2 onlookers and a stray chicken who honestly seems to be taking sides. And you realize there must be a better way to settle this. Fortunately, there is, and it's only a few stylus strokes away. The smell of damp clay fills your nose as you duck into a side alley, away from the marketplace. It's quieter here, and cooler. A boy is crouched near a doorway, poking at something in the dust. He looks up, grins, and shows you a handful of tiny clay shapes, tokens. Some cone-shaped, others flattened discs. One even has a little scratch that might be an early attempt at doodling a cow. It's part calculator, part promise, part toy, and he knows it. Across the street, someone's hammering open a clay ball, slowly, with the kind of caution you'd reserve for handling ancient secrets or very fragile fruit. You realize what you're looking at. A bulle, an official clay envelope, sealed shut with tiny clay tokens inside, each representing a transaction. What's happening now is essentially Mesopotamian accounting's version of cracking open the safe. That bulle? It's about to change everything. Because here's the problem. While bulle were more secure than loose tokens, they were still inefficient. Imagine needing to know how much barley a merchant promised you, only you can't see the contents without smashing the whole thing open. Kind of like getting a receipt sealed in epoxy. And so, someone, maybe a weary temple scribe, maybe a very tired barley trader, invented a smarter method. Instead of keeping the tokens inside the bulle, they began pressing the tokens into the surface of the wet clay before sealing it up. This created an impression, a record you could read from the outside. No smashing required. Genius. Lazy genius, but genius. It was a small step, but a radical one. Pressing the image of the token onto clay meant you didn't need the token at all. Eventually, scribes realized they could ditch the physical tokens altogether and just draw the shapes directly into the clay using a stylus. The receipt had gone fully digital, Well, analog digital, but you get the point. That stylus? It was often made from reed, stiff, narrow, and triangular at the tip. When pressed into soft clay, it left a series of wedge-shaped marks. Cuneiform, from the Latin cuneus, meaning wedge. At first, these marks represented numbers and things. 10 jars of oil, 3 sheep. But eventually, they started to stand for sounds, then words, then sentences. You're watching the beginning of writing. Not poetry, not sacred texts, not even gossip, though that came soon enough. No. This was bookkeeping. Receipts. And somewhere in that quiet transformation from token to impression to wedge mark, a new kind of thinking took hold. Still, the belay didn't disappear overnight. For a while, both systems coexisted. Some merchants still liked sealing tokens inside. Others adopted the pressed impression method. Some probably did both, depending on how much they trusted the other party, or how much clay they had left that day. And historians still argue over who pushed this change forward. Was it the priests looking to streamline their temple records? Or the traders eager to lighten their satchels and get moving downriver faster? The debate continues, wedged somewhere between archaeology and academic coffee breaks. One curious detail. Bully with both sealed contents and outside impressions have been found. Kind of like taping your receipt to the outside of your lunchbox while the sandwich is still inside. Belt and suspenders, Mesopotamian style. As you lean back against a warm wall, you spot another scribe at work. This one's younger, maybe still apprenticing. His clay tablet rests on a wooden plank balanced between 2 upturned baskets. He presses the stylus in carefully, tongue sticking out slightly. He's writing about goats, a lot of goats. You wonder if he knows he's inventing the foundation of modern record-keeping. Probably not. He's just trying to make his wedges straight and not get yelled at. But in these sleepy alleys, with clay still damp and soft under the setting sun, you're witnessing the quiet birth of bureaucracy. And it all starts with a simple need, to say, yes, I really did deliver those goats. The tablet feels warm in your hand, like it's been sitting in the sun too long. You run a finger along the still damp wedge marks. They're oddly satisfying, like pressing your fingertip into wet sand. Across from you, the young scribe sighs and mutters something under his breath about crooked lines. He smooths a mistake with the back of his hand and starts again. You're watching a ritual unfold, one that would become the cornerstone of ancient bureaucracy. The birth of the written receipt. No ink, no paper, just soft clay, a stylus made from river reed, and the oddly beautiful script of cuneiform, scratched with care. Each wedge tells a story. Not a dramatic one. There are no kings slaying monsters here, but a story nonetheless. 6 sheep delivered. 4 baskets of barley accepted. 3 days' labor recorded. It's quiet magic, the kind you only notice if you're very still and very patient. By now, the use of wedge-shaped symbols has replaced the old 3-dimensional tokens entirely. The scribes have developed a system that's compact, repeatable, and endlessly flexible. And as you peer over the apprentice's shoulder, you notice something else. Rows and columns. This isn't just writing, it's math. The Mesopotamians, as it turns out, were deeply into counting. Not in tens like we do, but in 60s. Sexagesimal, it's called. So instead of going from 9 to 10, they'd count 59, and then roll over to 160. Which sounds confusing, until you remember that we still use it today in things like minutes, seconds, and circles. Want to track temple rations for 100 workers over 30 days? No problem. Want to calculate the total number of fish owed to the gods from a canal tax? You'd better hope your scribe paid attention in school. This system of 60s wasn't just about big numbers. It made fractions smoother too. You tried dividing a circle into thirds using base 10. Now try it in base 60. Satisfying, right? These were practical thinkers. They weren't wasting time with philosophical debates about numbers. They were just trying to figure out how much grain was missing from storage pit B and who to yell at about it. And as scribes got more comfortable with the stylus, they began to experiment. Marks became more abstract, more efficient. Instead of drawing a sheep every time they meant sheep, they used simplified signs. Sometimes they combined them, like a little wedge that meant barley next to a triangle that meant day, which together meant something bureaucratic and boring, probably, but effective. You follow one such tablet as it's carefully carried to a temple storage room. The man holding it walks slowly, reverently, like he's carrying something far more precious than a list of onions delivered last week. And in a way, he is. These tablets are official, permanent, at least until someone reuses the clay. They get stacked on shelves, bundled into clay jars, or stored in low-slung archive rooms with names like Grain Deliveries, Year 17. It's not thrilling, but it's civilization. Imagine trying to run a city without a single piece of paper or spreadsheet. These tablets were the spreadsheets. Historians still argue whether the math came first or the writing. Some claim numerical tablets predate written signs for language. Others believe the two systems evolved together, like clay twins born out of necessity and long afternoons of trade. What's certain is that numbers and words were married early on in Mesopotamia, and it was a very practical, if emotionally distant, relationship. Evening is settling in. You can hear a distant reed flute, probably someone taking a break from calculating sheep rations. A warm breeze kicks up dust from the alleyway. And you realize receipts might not seem thrilling. But here, surrounded by soft clay and careful marks, you've stumbled into the birthplace of trust, math, and, well, bureaucracy. And that, in its own boring wedge-shaped way, is kind of beautiful. You're reclining now, on a low mud brick bench, in the shade of a fig tree that someone very forward-thinking planted generations ago. From here, you watch a procession of scribes pass by, each cradling a small stack of clay tablets like they're holding baby turtles. Not dramatic, but weirdly endearing. They're heading toward the temple, not for worship, but for filing. See, temples in Mesopotamia weren't just spiritual centers. They were administrative hubs, economic engines, and probably the loudest buildings in the neighborhood. Inside, scribes managed inventories, tracked labor, and issued receipts. Lots and lots of receipts. You'd think a god needed to know exactly how many ducks were sacrificed in his name last week. Turns out, it was the temple managers who really needed that data. Today, a tablet documenting a delivery of fish is being reviewed. The fish were brought from downstream by a boatman named something like Enlil Nasir. It lists the type of fish, mud carp mostly, and how many jars of salted ones were stored in the temple's northern pantry. It even includes the date, in the 3rd year of the reign of King Lipit Ishtar, in the month of barley harvest. Is it thrilling? Not exactly, but it's tidy, organized, and kind of satisfying. Like opening a drawer full of perfectly arranged socks. As the senior scribe scans the tablet, his apprentice leans in too far, accidentally nudging a pot of ink off the table. It crashes to the floor. Everyone stares. Then, blessedly, a soft chuckle breaks the silence. The tablet remains unharmed. Barely. That same tablet is now being cataloged, assigned a storage code, not unlike a library's Dewey Decimal. It will be tucked into a clay jar with similar documents and placed on a shelf, part of a growing archive that future scribes will reference to settle disputes, verify deliveries, or simply double-check how many goats were promised by whom and when. And this act of record-keeping, is how Mesopotamia becomes more than a cluster of farms and fishing boats. It becomes a functioning city, because it's no longer just about remembering who owes what. It's about proving it. Written proof. a clay-based version of receipts or it didn't happen. One particularly odd clay fragment nearby records a temple's transaction involving scented oil and a rather obscure ritual involving a goat and a moon-shaped bread. Why? Scholars are still debating it. Some think it's a purification rite, others suspect it's a temple dinner gone weirdly ceremonial. One theory? The goat just smelled bad and needed divine deodorizing. We may never know. The important thing is this. The receipt was issued. Someone took the time to record it, stamp it with a seal, and store it in a jar labeled miscellaneous rituals. That kind of obsessive record-keeping is how history survives. Not the dramatic stuff, the epic battles, the royal proclamations, but the little things. How much grain was traded? How many workers were paid in beer? Whether the goat smelled good or bad? Historians still argue whether these temple archives were purely functional or served as status symbols, proof of a city's intellectual power and wealth. Some believe they were bragging rights. Look at how much stuff we've recorded. Others argue they were just trying not to get yelled at by their supervisors. Both could be true. You glance around. The air is thick with the smell of wet clay, roasted onions, and something faintly floral. Maybe that mysterious scented oil. A cart creaks past, carrying more tablets probably. Even the wheels sound bureaucratic. Here in the temple's shadow, in the heart of the scribe's dusty little kingdom, everything runs on records. Trade, taxes, rituals, deliveries. And it all rests on one idea. If it's not written down, it doesn't count. You've walked into the cool interior of a tablet room, essentially a storage closet, but one with ambitions. The air smells faintly of baked earth and something like pressed thyme. Or maybe it's just dust. The walls are lined with shelves made of reed and wood, sagging under the collective weight of thousands of tiny clay tablets. Each one is a record. Not of epics, not of prophecies, but of ordinary exchanges. And yes, more receipts. One shelf is labeled Wool Deliveries, Canal District. Another? Lentil Rations, Temple Workers. There's even a basket labeled Broken Tablets, possibly important. You suspect that's where all the office drama ends up. These aren't just records. They're the earliest paper trail. Well, clay trail. In human history. Scribes carefully organize them using a system of date formulas, location names, and royal regnal years. Instead of saying April 12th, 2025, they'd write on the 10th day of the barley month, in the 5th year of Hammurabi. Kind of poetic. Very inefficient. You pick up a tablet at random. It's oddly heavy in the hand, about the size of a modern smartphone, but with all the readability of a brick. The marks are sharp, deliberate. You're looking at a receipt confirming the transfer of 7 measures of emmer wheat carried from the granary of Nanshi by donkey to the kitchens of Enlil's temple. It even notes the condition of the sacks. Mostly dry, slightly frayed. Someone was being thorough. And yet, you can't help but admire it. This is bureaucracy as art. You imagine the scribe muttering under his breath, stylus poised like a conductor's baton. Maybe he felt proud of this one. Crisp lines, symmetrical layout, the kind of tablet you might show off to other scribes at the tavern. There's a debate among historians about just how widespread literacy really was. Some think only a tiny elite, maybe 1%, could read and write cuneiform. Others believe there were more low-level scribes than we assume, especially in bustling urban centers like Nippur and Lagash. Either way, reading was power. If you could make sense of these marks, you weren't just literate, you were trusted. But being a scribe wasn't just about reading, it was about endurance. You had to master over 600 signs, memorize lists of animals, crops, tools, and trade phrases. You wrote while crouched or kneeling, your stylus perpetually smudged with dust and clay. And if you messed up, you didn't just erase, you started over. The delete key had not yet been invented. One curious tablet here, clearly handled many times, features not numbers, but complaints. It's a receipt dispute, recording that a shipment of copper ingots did not arrive as expected. The language is formal, but there's passive-aggressive energy in those wedges. You can practically hear the scribe sighing. And then you spot something odd. A curved clay tag, attached by string to a larger tablet. It's an index, a Mesopotamian sticky note, used to summarize the contents of the big tablet without unrolling it or, breaking your back. A brilliant little innovation that historians still geek out over. A fly buzzes somewhere in the shadows, landing briefly on a tablet labeled Brickmaker Wages. That's right. There were receipts for bricks. Thousands of them, often specifying who made each one, when, and from which mud pit. Some even recorded weather conditions like too windy for shaping, or dry clay today, lucky. It's also tactile. And yes, it's boring. Deliciously boring. But here in this archive room, filled with the rustle of reed shelving and the faint patter of distant sandals, you're immersed in a world where even boredom has been immortalized in clay. You sit back, letting the cool, dark room wrap around you like a library from another time. Receipts everywhere, and every one of them whispering, softly but firmly, this mattered. The sun's slanting lower now, casting a buttery golden light across the courtyard where a new delivery has just arrived. Sacks of barley, bouncing gently on the backs of donkeys who look like they've had absolutely enough of this job. You step aside as a boy with a clay tablet on a string around his neck jogs past you, yelling something about weights not matching. Welcome to the world of Mesopotamian metrology, the science of measuring stuff when your entire toolkit includes stones, sticks, and good old-fashioned suspicion. Before anything is accepted into the temple or storehouse, it's weighed and recorded. Twice. Maybe 3 times if the scribe had a bad experience last week. You watch as a clerk hauls out a balance scale, 2 pans, suspended from a beam, counterweighted with polished stones labeled 1 shekel, half mina, and your personal favorite, approximate goat equivalent. Okay, you made that one up, but not by much. These weights weren't improvised. They were standardized. Well, sort of. Each city-state had its own preferred system. 1 mina in Ur might not quite match 1 mina in Babylon, and historians still argue whether that was accidental or a clever way to scam out-of-town traders. But the principle was sound. Weight, measure, verify, record. It wasn't just about trust, it was about proof. You didn't just say you received 12 measures of barley. You had the weight noted on a clay tablet, signed, or rather sealed, with a little cylinder rolled across the surface like a bureaucratic flourish. These seals were kind of a big deal. Each one was carved with unique images, gods, animals, patterns, and acted like a signature. You rolled your seal over wet clay, and voila, proof that this transaction was official. Some seals were inherited, others stolen. A few were probably just incredibly boring, like, this tablet approved by Eridu's third best fish merchant. And it wasn't just barley and fish that got weighed. Copper, silver, lapis lazuli, goat hides, and even perfume were all carefully balanced, logged, and stored. You imagine someone trying to weigh out exactly 3 shekels of honey without attracting ants. Good luck with that. As the donkey handler unloads the last sack, the scribe finishes his work. Quick, precise wedge marks, with a little space left at the bottom for sealing. The apprentice offers a seal carved with what looks like 2 lions arguing under a tree. It's oddly charming. Nearby, another scribe is arguing over a discrepancy. The delivery says 2 full baskets of onions, but the weight doesn't match yesterday's onion basket weight. You wouldn't think onions could cause so much stress. But when gods, temple cooks, and tax quotas are involved, oh, they can. A group of kids chases a puppy through the courtyard, narrowly missing a stack of drying tablets. One topples. There's a brief, panicked silence. But the tablet is fine. Just a record of firewood owed to a brewer. Everyone exhales. You pause to think about how much of this would be lost if the clay hadn't been accidentally baked. You see, most receipts were dried in the sun, not meant to last forever. But every so often, a fire would sweep through a city or a storehouse, and the tablets would harden into stone. Disasters turned them into artifacts. Mistakes made them immortal. There's something kind of poetic in that. The most boring parts of ancient life, measures, weights, receipts, survived because someone forgot to put out a fire. So here you are, among sacks of grain and the soft murmurs of haggling, watching civilization balance itself, one shekel at a time, one wedge-marked receipt after another. It's not heroic, but it's essential. A different kind of epic, the quiet, dusty battle of numbers, trust, and tiny weights carved from stone. Evening has slipped in, and the streets of the city begin to quiet. Except for a few stubborn market stalls and the occasional clatter of a tipped-over water jar. You wander now toward a quieter part of the settlement, a neighborhood of modest homes where the scribes and workers live, and where receipts become a bit more personal. Here, record-keeping isn't just about temples or taxes. It's about dowries, debts, and land plots passed from uncle to nephew over cups of warm beer. The clay tablet isn't just a receipt anymore. It's a contract. And depending on how well you store it, your entire legal standing. You pass by a humble doorway where a father and daughter are sitting cross-legged on a mat. They're going over a betrothal agreement. Nothing fancy, just a note about the livestock and textiles to be exchanged when the marriage happens in 3 moons. The father is insistent. The clause about the spare goat must be included. The scribe nods, obligingly carving it in. No one's losing a goat over a clerical error. That tablet will go into a clay envelope. Yes, a tablet inside a clay shell, stamped with both parties' seals, like bubble wrap for bureaucracy. If there's ever a dispute, the envelope is broken, the original pulled out, and the finger-pointing begins. You're invited to sit with another scribe, this one carefully recording a land rental agreement. The renter will use the field from the edge of the canal to the fig tree, but not including the fig tree, because the tree apparently belongs to someone else. The tablet includes terms like water rights, expected barley yield, and what to do if a stray donkey tramples the crops. Answer: it's always the donkey owner's fault. One quirky tablet from a nearby home catches your eye. It's unusually round, like a flattened meatball, and details a trade: 2 ceramic bowls in exchange for a massage. That's right, a massage. The service is recorded as pressing of limbs for comfort. Scholars still debate whether this was casual self-care or had something more ritualistic going on. One theory? It involved aromatic oils and was reserved for post-harvest celebrations. Another? The scribe just needed a back rub and had spare bowls lying around. You chuckle. Even here, thousands of years ago, someone bartered for a spa day. Legal records like this weren't just about keeping order, they were about making daily life feel solid. In a world of floods, fires, and kings who might decide tomorrow that your land now belongs to his cousin, a tablet was a strange kind of shield. It said, "This happened. This is mine. We agreed." And it wasn't always peaceful. Sometimes disputes erupted over ambiguous tablet phrasing, like whether a boundary included the large rock that looks like a sheep, or just the shadow of the sheep rock at sunset. No joke. That's an actual case from a dig site near ancient Sippar. Historians still debate how accessible this legal system truly was. Could a regular farmer contest a noble's claim? Could a woman enforce a dowry contract? The truth is murky. Some records show surprising fairness, while others hint that power, as usual, tipped the scales. But what's clear is this: people used receipts, not just to buy and sell, but to argue, prove, and defend. Every boring little contract was also a declaration of identity: your land, your goods, your story. The moon rises gently now, casting silver light over a city of sleeping scribes and quiet courtyards. Somewhere, A pot cracks as it cools. You lean back on a woven mat, watching the flickering glow of oil lamps through thin reed windows, surrounded by clay tablets that never speak above a whisper, but never forget what they've seen. Now, you make your way toward the outskirts of town, where the clay is softest. The reeds grow thick along the canal banks, and the tablet kilns bake lazily in the evening warmth. This is where receipts are born, not in scroll-lined chambers or dusty storerooms, but here, in the damp clay between a scribe's fingers. You kneel beside a young apprentice, maybe 12, maybe 13. He's just flattened a fistful of river clay onto a wooden board. With practiced calm, he smooths the surface using a polished pebble, humming a song about a scribe who forgot to sign his own pay receipt. It's funnier in Sumerian. Then the stylus appears, a triangle-tipped reed, cut just so. You watch as he presses gentle wedge shapes into the clay. Not dragging, not scratching, just firm, deliberate pokes. It's almost meditative. You get the sense this kid could keep this rhythm for hours, and probably will. The tablet he's copying lists 4 bundles of dried fish delivered to the temple kitchens, less 1 bundle due to spoilage. He pauses before writing spoilage and glances at his teacher, who nods. Yes, there's a symbol for that. There's even one for smells wrong. No kidding. As the tablet nears completion, the boy prepares a small stamp, the cylinder seal. He rolls it across the soft clay with a steady hand. The result? A tiny parade of goats under a crescent moon. It's adorable. And apparently legally binding. These seals weren't just decorations. They were security, identity, even storytelling. Some depicted prayers, myths, or family crests. Others just showed rows of animals, maybe suggesting the owner's job or favorite livestock. One particularly famous seal shows a man wrestling 2 lions. Either he was very brave or very dishonest about his resume. And here's where things get fun. A few of these seals were fakes. Archaeologists have found signs of forged seals, carefully copied patterns, or altered symbols meant to trick a scribe in a hurry. Fraud, it turns out, is as old as receipts themselves. Historians still argue whether most seal copying was malicious or simply an apprentice trying to look cool. Once the tablet is sealed and reviewed, it's set aside to dry. On sunny days, tablets might be baked gently outside, but for records that mattered, contracts, tax ledgers, or anything that might outlive the current goat crisis, scribes used kilns to harden the tablets permanently. You peer into one of these kilns now, where the orange heat glows like a sleepy eye. Inside, dozens of tablets sit stacked like cookies, each one a slice of someone's day. The smell is earthy and a little smoky. A woman at the next kiln is muttering as she rebakes a tablet that cracked. Should have used less grit, she sighs. Even 4,000 years ago, someone was grumbling about quality control. You take a moment to look around this muddy, peaceful place. It's not glamorous. There are no golden idols, no royal banquets. Just kids with reed pens and old women baking contracts about lentils. But this is where civilization grew its backbone. Without clay and stylus, there's no accountability. No way to track taxes, settle debts, count cattle. Without receipts, someone could always just say, "I never got that barley." And without a system to record that truth, you're back to yelling over fences. So here at the edge of the city where fire meets riverbank, where the hum of frogs mixes with the scratch of reeds on clay, you sit beside the oldest filing system in the world. The moon reflects off the canal like melted tin. A donkey brays somewhere far off. And in the warm, earthy glow of the kiln, a fresh batch of receipts is quietly, gloriously immortalized. The night deepens, and the stars stretch wide over the rooftops of Ur. Somewhere in the distance, a lute strums softly. Off-key, maybe, but still enough to make you feel like time itself is settling down. You wander now through the city's heart, where the oldest temple rises like a sleeping beast. It's here that the biggest, most mysterious receipts are kept. These aren't about fish or figs. These are receipts for the gods. You ease your way into the temple archive, A long, cool chamber filled with shelf after shelf of clay tablets. They lie flat, stacked neatly, like rows of polite sandwiches. A priest scribe glances up from his work and waves you in. His hair is tied in a knot, his fingers dusted with clay. He's cataloging sacrificial offerings: goats, oxen, incense, and more goats. Lots of goats. You look over his shoulder as he records 3 fattened rams for Nana, god of the moon. But there's a twist. Next to the offering list, there's a note that the rams were especially noisy, which the gods may or may not appreciate. It's unclear whether this was a joke or part of the ritual precision. Historians still argue whether scribes snuck humor into temple records, or if ancient deities simply had strong opinions about livestock volume. Here, receipts serve not just human needs but divine expectations. If the city fell into drought or plague, temple officials could check their records. Had the proper rites been performed? Were the gods offended because the last incense batch was second-rate? It's accountability. To the sky. You're shown a large tablet stored in a clay box, pulled carefully from a shelf. It's an inventory of temple silver. How much was collected, who counted it, and what portion was set aside for rebuilding the ziggurat stairs, which apparently kept cracking. The priest mutters something about cheap limestone, which sounds like an ancient version of blaming the contractor. Some receipts are almost poetic, offerings described in luscious detail. 1 jug of first-pressed fig wine, unclouded, in a clean jar from the north kiln. There's beauty in the precision. Even when it's bureaucracy, it's oddly tender. You begin to notice something else. A few tablets have extra markings: stars, moons, scribbles at the edges, personal notations, clerical jokes, or just doodles by bored interns. One tablet includes a crude drawing of a man falling off a donkey. No explanation, but you like to believe there's a great story behind it. And then there are the anomalies. Blank tablets in storage, tablets that mention transactions that never happened, and those odd receipts that say, "Item withheld, see other record." Scholars still debate whether this points to a sophisticated archival system or just sheer chaos behind the temple curtain. A breeze drifts through the hallway and the oil lamps flicker. Somewhere above you, priests murmur evening chants. The temple smells of warm stone, smoke, and the faint tang of old clay, a scent that seems to have soaked into the walls over centuries. You rest for a moment beside a shelf labeled with little clay tags. This one is full of debt records, people who owed labor, barley, textiles. Some names are marked with a wedge symbol meaning paid. Others? Still waiting after 4,000 years. That's a serious late fee. And yet, despite the age, the crumbling shelves, and the silence of the gods they served, these records still whisper. They tell us who cooked, who worked, who loved, who owed, and who hoped that next month's grain harvest would finally be enough. Outside, the wind nudges the reeds along the canal. The city is mostly asleep. But in this temple of numbers and names, the oldest receipts in the world continue to keep watch. They don't sparkle, they don't shout, but they last. And now, everything grows softer. The markets have long since quieted. The scribes have rolled up their mats. Even the kilns have cooled to a soft hush, their embers pulsing gently in the dark. Clay tablets lie stacked in their shelves like sleeping thoughts, each one a quiet whisper from a world that once bustled, bargained, and believed. You feel the weight of the evening settle around you like a woven blanket. The stars above, those same stars the temple priests once charted in careful columns, glimmer faintly, but they ask nothing of you. No record-keeping, no lists, just calm. You let your breath slow, as if it were syncing with the rhythms of the past. The scribe's gentle tapping, the potter's turning wheel, the soft rustle of palm leaves in a midnight breeze. Even the gods, stern and many-eyed, seem at ease for the moment. Nothing more is owed tonight. Not even a receipt.